all 1993 lectures, and we're privileged tonight to have Mr. Frank Sower, noted local historian, former mayor, first citizen of Frankfort, here to talk to us tonight about Frankfort's showplace, The Corner and Celebrities. Next month, we have an interesting lecture. Larry Moore is going to speak to us on the railroad coming to Frankfort. And then in November, Jim Wallace of the Kentucky Historical Society is going to speak to us on John Follis. So without any further to-do, I'd like to turn this over to our guest speaker, Mayor Sower.
Thank you very much, John. I appreciate those kind words. It's always nice to hear something very good. A couple of things I want to mention to you. First of all, let me tell you just a little funny to start with that I heard the other day. Many of you remember Kelly Smither. He was a clerk, I believe, over at the courthouse, and he has a daughter, Doris Pearman. Now most of you know Doris. And I was talking to her the other day, and she said, "Mayor, I want to tell you something that really happened." Said, "This is the honest to goodness truth." He said, "You know, my daddy used to love to go over to the courthouse and help count the votes." And he said it was a real hot election day, hot in temperature and hot politically. And said right after supper, why, my daddy went out on the front porch to swing with Mother, and said they were both hard of hearing. And finally, she said, Kelly Smither, her father, said, "You know, I think I'll go over to the count." And Mrs. Smither thought, she said, "I think I'll go over to LeCount's." LeCount's was a funeral home. And she said, "Well, what shall I do?" And he said, "Well, I think I'll go on over to the count." And again, she thought it was LeCount. And she said, "Well, who's dead?" And he said, he thought that she said, who's dead? And he said, "Clements." "Oh," she said, "well, Clements, I voted for a dead man this morning." You know, the corner in celebrities is something that we have here in Frankfort that probably no other area in the United States has, really and truly. And I have had the pleasure of giving many tours through the area, both bus tours and walking tours. And it really takes about an hour and a half to do it properly with a group. Don't get up and leave now, Mason. I'm not going to speak that long. So what I thought I'd try to do tonight, I have my watch, and I thought I'd go maybe about 25 minutes because I've been around long enough to know that anybody that goes past 25 minutes, two things could happen. People start walking out, or they'll go to sleep if they're not already asleep. So what I am going to try to do is just go about as far as we can on about 25 minutes, and then we'll call it an evening, and maybe I'll be invited back to finish it up another time. That's inviting yourself, Sarah, isn't it? Okay. Well, anyway, let me say this, that in the heart of historic old Frankfort, we have the corner in celebrities, and the area covers about 4 acres, bounded by Washington, Wilkinson, Maine, and Washington. It's quite an area, and many people have said this, that probably more men of prominence have lived in this area at least sometimes during their lives, than in any other area of similar size in the United States. And I believe that's probably true because the galaxy of distinguished men that have lived in this area includes 7 governors, 2 justices of the United States Supreme Court, 6 congressmen, 2 cabinet members, and 3 admirals of the United States Navy. So I doubt that any other area of that size could match that, men of prominence in the United States. I thought what we would do, we'd just start with probably the oldest and one of the most famous of the houses that's still standing, and that would be Liberty Hall. And Liberty Hall was built in 1796 by John Brown. Most of the bricks were burned in the back garden, and the wood was dried for 2 years in a huge shed in back of the house before it was built. John Brown actually was born in Staunton, Virginia in 1757. He went to William and Mary College. He graduated there. He went to Danville for a while, and then about 3 or 4 years after that, he came to Frankfort. He married a lovely lady by the name of Margaret Mason back about 1799. He was the son of a Presbyterian minister. The lady that he married, Margaretta Mason, was also the daughter of a Presbyterian minister, and his wife had a brother, John Mason, that was a Presbyterian minister, so you can see that they had close ties with the Presbyterian faith. John had 5 children. John and Margaretta had 5 children, but only 2 lived to maturity, and that was Mason Brown and Orlando Brown. They had 3 other children, 2 boys and a girl. And I think this is rather interesting, a little tidbit, as I call them, about 2 sons that they had. Margaretta had a son named Alfred, and he was born in February of 1803. But he died in January of 1804. He only lived about 11 months. And Margaretta, the wife of John Brown, was pregnant at the time. So when she bore us another son in May of 1804, why, she named the child Alfred II. But poor Alfred didn't live but about 3 months because he died on July the 30th, 1804. Now they had another daughter, not another, but they had a daughter by the name of Euphemia, sort of funny pronunciation, but Euphriama, something like that. It's hard for me to say. But anyway, she was a lovely girl. She was born in 1807. And when she was about 7 years old, she came down with a very high fever. And she passed away on October the 1st, 1814. One of the reasons they say now that helped to cause her death probably was an overdose of calomel at that time. And of course, as a result, you probably have heard the ghost story, the Gray Lady of Liberty Hall. I'm not going to go into that because that's another story by itself. But anyway, John Brown had these 2 sons that did survive, and Mason Brown, the older of the 2, he graduated from Yale University. He became a circuit judge, and then he was Secretary of State under Governor Charles S. Moorhead. And Orlando Brown, of course, became quite a famous newspaper man right here in Frankfort. As you look at the house on the left, why, you'll see a nice garden where Margaretta Brown and Elizabeth Love, who just lived down the street about a block away, It is said that they started in the first Sunday school west of the Allegheny Mountains. Margaretta Brown in particular was a very, very religious person. When Euphemia passed away, she took it very hard, and it was a severe blow to both of them, but for many years she wouldn't go out in society or any place. She just kept pretty much to herself. Let's now stroll on down. If you use our little paper that I gave you as a guide, we stroll on down to the Orlando Brown house. And Orlando Brown, as I have said, was the second son of John and Margaretta Brown. Orlando Brown was quite interested in politics, and he finally became a newspaper man, so to speak. Orlando Brown first married a lovely lady by the name of Elizabeth Harris, and she didn't live too long. So Orlando Brown built a beautiful house, Orlando Brown House. It was built in 1835, and the architect was none other than the noted Gideon Shyrock, who also was the architect on the courthouse and also on the old Capitol building. John Brown Sr. thought that he should make a division in his estate as he moved along in age, and he decided that he would give Liberty Hall to his son Mason Brown. So to try to make the inheritance equal, he decided that he would give the southern end of his property to Orlando Brown, and also sufficient money to build a beautiful home, which he did. He also gave him $5,000 in cash. $5,000 in cash is what it costs to build the Orlando Brown house. Orlando Brown had, he had 4 children, I believe it was, but only one survived, and his name was Orlando Brown Jr. And Orlando Brown Jr. Then married another lady, and they had 6 children. When they had the 6 children, there were 3 of them that didn't marry. Orlando III had passed away, and there were 2 men or sons that survived, and their names were Sam and Mason Brown. The 2 ladies that survived, I must tell you about them because their names were Mary Watts Brown and Annie Horde Brown. I knew both of these ladies very well because I lived just down the street. And Mary Watts Brown passed away in 1946, and she was 84 years old. And Annie Brown didn't pass away until 1955. They were lovely ladies. As I say, I knew them both very well, very gracious with charming manners. And when Annie finally passed away, why, she left all of the property to the National Colonial Dames Association, and they took it over to run as a museum. And they have used it as a museum since 1955. I might add that in 1956, the Colonial Dames also were able to secure Liberty Hall. In the meantime, or prior to that time, Liberty Hall had passed through many hands. And of course, we feel lucky that the Colonial Dames finally were able to get Liberty Hall and put it into good shape with a lot of help. Let me say this, getting back to Orlando Brown for a moment, I tell everybody on my tours that there's no question that Liberty Hall is just a great place. I love to take people back to the old fireplace there in the kitchen and show them how the utensils that people used back there in the old days in the kitchen. But, you know, only Browns lived in the Orlando Brown house. So many of the articles, the furniture, the china, the brass, are original in the Orlando Brown House. About the only change that has been made in the Orlando Brown House really is the kitchen back in the back, as many of you ladies probably know. So it's been dressed up, but well, I don't want to make a comparison between the two. They're both great places, Liberty Hall and Orlando Brown House. Let us now step across the street, and we'll be in front of the site of the Old Love Tavern. The Old Love Tavern was built in 1786 by James Wilkinson, and he intended it to be his home. It was a two-story log cabin, very nice, but he never lived there because he married in November of 1788 a very lovely lady, Ann Biddle, beautiful, charming, but she didn't care to live in that place, so it was never his home. Of course, the first legislature that met in Frankfort met there at that site, the Old Love Tavern, in November of 1793. After that, Major Thomas Love purchased the building in 1797, and it was used as a tavern for many years. They had many distinguished visitors there. Aaron Burr visited there, and also Louis Philippe of France visited there. I'll back up just a minute. I failed to mention the fact that we had a lot of distinguished visitors at Liberty Hall. There were 7 or 8 presidents of the United States that visited Liberty Hall, including Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, Zachary Taylor, Andrew Jackson, and Theodore Roosevelt, not counting General Lafayette, who came to America in 1825, and he came to Frankfort. I believe it was either April or May of 1825, and he visited in Liberty Hall. So we have a very distinguished group of people that visited those two places in particular. Now, just west of the Love House is the South Willis House. Dr. John G. South, the building was built about 1875, and John G. South was a minister to Panama. And Dr. South, who I remember him quite well, he married Christine Bradley, who was the only daughter of Governor Bradley, who was a Republican and a former governor of the state. And Governor Bradley also had a sister, and the sister married none other than Edward P. Marr, another Republican. I knew the Marrs quite well. There was a young boy, well, young at that time. His name was Charlie Bob Marr, and he was about my age, a little older maybe, and our backyards ran together. So while some of these distinguished visitors were at the South House, Charlie Bob would climb over the fence, and we would play basketball in my backyard. And we had a 5-gallon lard can. Some of you older folks remember the 5-gallon lard cans. We cut the bottom out of the lard can, and we nailed it up on a tree. And that's the way we played basketball, Charlie Bob and I, many, many years ago. Of course, Governor Willis, Judge Willis, was a circuit judge, not a circuit judge, but a judge on the Court of Appeal, and later became governor of Kentucky. So I have this to say for any of the Republicans that are thinking about running for governor. I would suggest to them that they live in the South House for a while, because nothing but Republicans have lived there to speak of and have become governors of Kentucky. We'll move back up to the corner, and I love to tell this, and some of the tour people get quite a kick out of it when I tell them that the next house on Wilkinson, just below the the Love Tavern, is the home of one of the finest of Frankfort's mayors. And then diagonally across the street we would be in front of the site of the Todd Lindsay House. It was built in 1872 by Harry Todd. He was a great steamboat captain. And then it was used by Senator William Lindsay. Senator Lindsay became a United States Senator when John G. Carlisle resigned, and he took his seat and was reelected in 1894. William Lindsay was married 3 times, and this is another little tidbit you might be interested in, but he was a United States Senator, married 3 times, and the last time he married a lady by the name of Eleanor Holmes, a lovely old lady. I remember her quite well. I remember in the house, as you go in the house, she had a great big parrot just on the inside on the right side. But the tidbit I want to tell you about is this. I remember her quite well. She was an elderly person when I was just probably a grade school growing up. And she used to wear a long black dress. And she'd walk uptown to do her shopping, of course. And then she'd come back by the old hardware store. And she'd come in Sower's Hardware. And we used to have whirls of kegs of nails way back, sort of in the back part of the hardware store. And she'd just come in and make herself at home. She'd sit down on a nail keg and rest there. You couldn't get her to sit in a chair or anything. No, she didn't want to be bothered. She'd sit right there on that nail keg. And she rested there until she felt better, and she could make it on back to her home, which was, of course, on the corner of Wilkinson and Wapping Street. Fine old lady. I remember her quite well. Let's now stroll on down to the John Bibb House. And the John Bibb House, of course, is on the corner of Wapping and it's on the corner of Wapping and Watson Court. It is the site of one of the first houses built on the street. It was built by a fellow by the name of John Instone, who came to America at the request of James Wilkinson to build boats for Wilkinson. We won't get into the Wilkinson controversy, but anyway, he came to America and he bought the property and he built the Bibb House, or rather John Bibb bought the property and built the Bibb House in 1845. John Bibb was a member of the legislature, both legislatures as a matter of fact. In 1865 he became quite an avid horticulturist, and he developed Bibb lettuce. Whenever I tell these people on these tours, I say, how many people have ever eaten Bibb lettuce? And most everybody's heard of Bibb lettuce. And I'll usually tell them, I said, my wife, Minnie Lynn, she can make the best sandwiches in the summertime and puts that good soft Bibb lettuce in there. It's so nice and tender. It's delicious. Well, John Bibb, he discovered how to make this Bibb lettuce. He gave it to his friends, and the friends all tried to find out how he actually experimented enough that he could come up with a combination with Bibb lettuce. It's a secret. Nobody has ever discovered how John Bibb made Bibb lettuce, but it is delicious. If we cross the street now, we'll be at the other corner of Watson Court and Wapping Street, and there we find the Cornel Watson House. And the Cornel Watson House was built about 1854, I believe it was. And it was the offices of the Kentucky Military Board during the Civil War. Major Cornel was a widower, and he loved parties. He just gave parties right and left, and he always included his friends, Orlando Brown, Lucas Broadhead, who was a great builder, And also, he would also include his friend E.H. Watson. The house passed down from Broadhead to Orlando Brown to Cornell to Watson, and finally in 1911 or thereabouts, why, it was sold to a Dr. Wilson. I remember him quite well. Some of you older folks maybe remember. Dr. Wilson had two grandchildren. One of them was named Mary Logan, and they had a son named Ted. He was a little bit older than I, but Ted Logan was very active. And also, that family started the Capitol Drug Store that was right next to the Capitol Theater many, many years ago. I remember when I guess I was in about the 8th grade, I used to go in there and work in the Capitol Drug because I loved to make myself a little extra ice cream soda. But that was a real nice family, and again, I knew them quite well. But across the street is the Rodman Hewitt house. And it was built in 1817 by Lucas Broadhead. Remember, I just finished talking about Lucas Broadhead. And it was built by Lucas Broadhead, and it was the home of Hugh Rodman. He was born there in 1859. In 1875, he got an appointment to West Point. He was in the Navy, of course, and he received a very fine commendation for the action that he took with the guns on the front end of the ship, a battery of them, in the Battle of Manila Bay, and he received this commendation from Admiral John Dewey at the Battle of Manila Bay. Afterwards, he was the captain of a couple of battleships, and then he retired about 1917 as a full admiral, Hugh Rodman. The house finally passed on down to a gentleman by the name of Fayette Hewitt. He was a Confederate. Oh, he was quite a Confederate. He served in the Confederate Army. He was an adjutant under the very famous John C. Breckinridge. He was an adjutant with him in the war. He served in many of the bloody battles because 3 horses were shot from while he was in these bloody battles, and the horses, of course, had to be done away with. But Fayette Hewitt was a fine person, and we loved to sit there on the front porch. I didn't know him very well because he passed away when I was just a real small person. But the other little tidbit about the place is this, and that is that the house finally passed on down to the Masons. And the Masons had several children, but Franklin Mason was one that was about my age. And we were great playmates. We would play in the backyards together and so forth, Franklin Mason. But Franklin Mason had an old grandfather. His name was Colonel Chin, and he had been in the Confederate Army. And Franklin and himself were sit on the porch in the evenings and listen to old Colonel Chin tell these stories about the Civil War. He was a dyed-in-the-wool Confederate, and as far as he was concerned, the Confederates never lost a battle, never. But that were some interesting stories that I had with that house. 1817 is quite an old house. That's just a great house. It brings back many, many memories. Nash Cox, of course, as you know, lives there now. Then as we move on down to the Vest Lindsay house. The Vest Lindsay house was built by a gentleman by the name of Alex Macy, M-A-C-Y, Alexander Macy, in about 1816. Finally, there was a gentleman by the name of George Graham Vest that was born there about 1830. He attained a lot of fame by his tribute to the dog. He moved to Missouri, for 25 years. He was United States Senator from Missouri, and he gained fame really as a young lawyer defending a dog. He in a court trial, and he finally said, "Man's best friend is a dog," and he won the case. After that, the House passed over to General Lindsay, and he was in the Union Army. He was a colonel in the Union Army, and I remember the two Lindsay sisters, the two Lindsay sisters that lived there. You probably remember the Lindsay sisters. They were just grand old ladies. But there was one thing about the two ladies, and they had charge accounts at our hardware store, and so did Senator William Lindsay, Mrs. Lindsay, you know, the one that sat on the nail kegs. They had an account at the store. Well, the Lindsay sisters at the Vest Lindsay house, they wanted to be sure that their last name was spelled Lendsey, underline the E. Well, Senator Lindsay's wife, she wanted to be sure that Lendsay. We wanted to be sure that we put the A on their name. But they were all fine people, there's no question about that. We now will cross the street to the Thomas Todd House. The Thomas Todd House was built in 1812. Thomas Todd was one of the very, very prominent men in early Kentucky history. He was born in 1765 up in Virginia, and he graduated from what is now Washington and Lee. He came to Danville, and when he was only 30 years of age, he was appointed the clerk of the conventions leading up to Kentucky entering the Union in 1792. As a matter of fact, the first Constitution is written in Thomas Todd's handwriting and is at the old Capitol locked up safely. About once a year they bring it out, and it's all glass enclosed, and you can look at a few pages, but you dare not touch. But I thought that was interesting. Thomas Todd was finally elected or appointed not a chief justice, but a justice of our Court of Appeals when he was about 36 years of age. And at 40 years of age, he was made the Chief Justice of the Court of Appeals. He made such a record for himself that in 1807, President Thomas Jefferson appointed him on the Supreme Court. Well, in the meantime, his first wife, had passed away, and that's another story. I'll try to get to it maybe in just a minute. But he went on, his first wife had passed away, and they had about 4 children by his first wife, but he went to Washington, D.C. as a justice on the Supreme Court, and he was invited many times to the White House. As a result, there was a lovely lady there in the White House that was not married. Her name was Lucy Payne, and Lucy Payne was a sister of Dolly Madison. And the first thing you know, they got married. And it is Lucy Payne, who's a sister of Dolly Madison, and Thomas Todd were married in what is recorded as the first wedding that ever took place in the White House in 1812. Thomas Todd and Lucy Payne had 3 children. I might mention this important fact that I believe it was the first son of their first marriage. He married Letitia Shelby, who was the youngest daughter of Governor Isaac Shelby. Another interesting thing is the fact the second son of Thomas Todd, John Harris Todd, he married the beautiful Maria Knox Ennis, a beautiful girl. And after John Harris Todd passed away young at the age of 29, Maria Knox Ennis Todd then became the second wife of John J. Crittenden. So it is interesting, so interesting about the Todds. I don't know whether I have much time left, but I will just mention Robert P. Letcher. Diagonally across the street is the Robert P. Letcher home. It was built in 1840. It's called the Letcher Lindsay House, actually. It's now the home of the Women's Club of Frankfort. Robert P. Letcher was a very fine man, a very jolly man. I'll quickly go through this because he was noted for his wit. He loved to play the fiddle. He loved to have a good time. He was a member of the legislature from Garrett County. That's where he came first, from Garrett County. Then he was elected to Congress and served up there about 12 years. And then he came back to Frankfort and ran for the legislature again. And in 1838 it was, there was a race for the Speaker of the House. And he defeated, this again shows you how close votes can be. And the winner can come up with just a very few votes over his opponent. But Letcher defeated former Governor James T. Moorhead by a count of 50 to 48 for Speaker of the House in 1838. Then a couple of years later, while the Whigs nominated him for governor of Kentucky, and he easily defeated his opponent. I believe the gentleman's name was French. There is so much more. We have the Macklin House, we have the Chapman Coleman Todd House, the Moorhead House, the John J. Crittenden House, where you could speak a whole evening on that, and John J. Crittenden. But I remember one time that I had been mayor a short while, and of course everybody is anxious for the mayor to come and speak to him, and I never will forget I went to speak to a very fine group, and after I had finished, I was a little nervous, but after I finished, I said, Mama, I call my wife Mama sometimes, I said, Mama, how'd I do? Oh, she said, you missed many opportunities. I said, what do you mean, missed many opportunities? She said, the many opportunities that you had of sitting down. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Sower. Frankfort is indeed fortunate to have the Corner and Celebrities area. It's an architectural and historical treasure. But I think that Frank Sower is also a treasure that Frankfort is and should be proud of. Well, that's our program for this evening, and thank you all for coming out. And I thank Mayor Sower for a very interesting talk. And we'll meet again October 14th to hear Larry Moore speak about the railroad coming to Frankfort. For those of you that aren't members of Historic Frankfort but would like to become members of Historic Frankfort and help support our lecture series and our other endeavors, I have some membership forms that I'll leave up here, and you're more than welcome to come by and pick one up. It also has our lecture series for the rest of the year. So thank you very much, and good night.